Hello and welcome back. So I've been working on this game dev YouTube channel for maybe like 3 or 4 months. It's been a lot of fun and it's been steadily growing. Yesterday I ticked over 500 subscribers, and to celebrate I'm doing a game jam today. So I'm going to start off by creating a new GitHub repository. And just a quick disclaimer, I just woke up so I'm still pretty sleepy. So I might ramble a lot, and this isn't gonna be like one of my normal videos where it's like straight into the point. Like this, I haven't planned this. I'm just diving into it, and I'm just gonna create a game in the next 8 hours. So if that sounds interesting, feel free to keep watching. So what do I want to call this? That seems fairly explicit. 500 subs, game jam, straight to the point. So now I have a repository set up, and that is in my documents/GitHub folder. The first thing I want to do is set up a git ignore. So I'm just going to steal that from one of my other recent projects. And that looks like this. And that's just going to prevent certain Unity files from being uploaded. Like I don't need the builds to upload every single time because those take up a lot of space. And I think I don't upload like lightmap files because those take up a lot of space too. So I'm just copying all the contents of my git ignore, and I'm going to paste that into this one. Save, and let's just update the repository. And for the description, I'll just say a simple game I made in one day. Publish. And if this setup process is too boring for you, feel free to skip ahead. Um, this is probably going to be a pretty long video, or a series of videos. And I'm going to call this Promethean. No, I don't like that. I'm just going to call it Game Jam 500. And right off the bat, I don't think I'm going to bother importing asset packages, even though I'm probably going to use the characters package. I don't need the whole characters package, so if I import it after the project is built, shoot, I just created it in the wrong spot. Alright, so I made it on the desktop. I can just drag that into this folder here, and we open Unity. And one of my big goals for this project is to focus on level design. So I'm probably going to spend a lot of time in Blender. Alright, so I made a folder for scripts and scenes, and I'll do models. Whoops. Let me know in the comments what you think of this style of video. Is it too slow? Do you learn anything? And for my last folder, I'll call this materials. Now I'm going to open up Blender. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to go up to Assets, Import Package, and Characters. And I want the first-person character because I'm doing a first-person game. I don't need this rollerball package. And sometimes I use the third-person animations, like for AI characters. So I like bringing it in this folder, I don't like these textures though because they're huge and they take forever to import sometimes. So I'm unchecking those. And these are like user interface sprites, so I might as well take those. And I like these utility scripts, so I'll take those too. And as I mentioned before, my primary focus in this is to create interesting levels. So I'm just going to quickly open up Blender, and I'm just going to start with this basic cube. Scale it down. And now I'm trying to decide if I want to do this in a modular way, or if I just want everything to be built in Blender. And I think that I will try to keep it fairly modular, but I'm still going to keep all the objects in Blender. So what I mean by that is I'm going to create pieces that I can use to duplicate and like sort of like mix and match the different pieces. But I'm not going to bother like trying to move them around in Unity. I'm just going to create pieces, Shift D to duplicate, and go about it like that. And if I unwrap them in Blender and then duplicate them in Blender, each separate piece should still have its own UV mapping. So it'll work out. It'll make more sense later. Now I'm just going to scale this up by 10, so S, and I don't want to scale it on the Z axis. So I'm going to hit S, Shift Z, and now it's just scaling on X and Y, and then 10. And I'll save that into my new Unity folder. So that's Documents, GitHub, Models, and Arc Prototype. And I always forget, Blender and Unity have different rotation systems. So this came in at a default of minus 90 degrees in the X direction, which is super, super annoying. So to fix that, RX minus 90, Control A to apply rotation and scale, and then RX 90. So now I'm working on the model in the same way that I was before, but the last rotation offset hasn't been applied. And so now, for some reason, this just works. Now, there's no rotation in Unity. And it looks like I'm still working on the same thing in Blender. So drop that in, reset the position, and in my import settings, I want to make sure that this generates colliders. Oh, there it is. I'm like, why am I not seeing it? Okay, so generate colliders is now checked. I'm going to apply that. And this has a default mesh collider. So I'm going to delete the camera from the scene and go into standard assets, characters, first person, and prefabs. And I think I'll take this one. I've experimented quite a bit with both the FPS control and the rigid body. I don't like the way the rigid body jumps. He jumps and then carries his momentum, and it's hard to control while he's in the air. So it feels frustrating to me to play as that character. And I hate the default footsteps downs. So I'm going to go into audio source and just drop this to 0. I'll apply that to the prefab. And while I'm at it, I'm going to expand this mouse look section and turn off lock cursor because I hate that. When I'm working on it, I do not want my cursor to disappear. Now I'm going into scenes, and I'm just going to save this as level prototype. Alright, so the forward direction for the map should be this way. And just to test that, I'm going to Control Tab, Face Mode, E to extrude by, let's say 10. why don't we do 20? So once again, grab the face, E to extrude, and 20. And I want to keep this fairly modular. I'm trying to think of a way to create a wall here without completely. Oh, actually, I'm going to hit Control L, Shift D, and then hold Control as I snap this around. So that'll snap to that position. And I'm going to hit Control R, scroll this up to 2, and then scale these out in the Y direction. Grab this face and extrude by, let's just say 10. Now if I save this, it should appear in front of the character. So he's facing this way, and there's that wall over there. So that makes sense. I'm going to hit Control R again, scroll up, and scale this on the X direction. And actually, I think I want to use the solidify modifier for the walls. So I'm going to hit Control Z a bunch of times and just go back to my basic plane. Now from this plane, I'm going to take an edge and Shift D to duplicate and then E to extrude by 20. And why don't I take that back by 10? So G, Z minus 10. So this is our wall. I'm going to hit Control L and then scale by 0.9. Move that down a little bit and add a solidify modifier. So the benefit of using the solidify modifier now is that I'm only working on one face essentially. So if I want to create a door in this face, I can just hit Control R, scroll up, Control R to create the door height, and then simply delete one face. Whoops. Delete one face, and now I have a doorway. And in a similar fashion, if I want to now create a ceiling, all I have to do is get this whole edge loop and just hit F to create a face. And now I can take this whole piece, duplicate it, pull it back, and rotate it 180 around the Z-axis. And I'm going to delete all 5 of these faces and just create one single face for that whole area. Oops. Alright, so now the player should be boxed in. And nothing is sacred. If I don't like the way it looks, I'm just going to delete it right away. Control L, delete. Control L, delete. Yeah, that looks more interesting. Oops. All right, let's try that out. I don't like that last turn. And clearly, this is not modular at all. I'm having fun, and it's progressing quickly. But there's no way I could take this piece and attach more pieces to it, like in a Lego type way, and that's fine. I don't really know what I want out of this game yet, but I'm enjoying the creative process. So what do I want to do next? I could give the player a double jump. There's not really any goal yet. I'm just going to duplicate this face, scale it on the X direction, and place it around here. So that the player should have a little bit more area to explore. Scale it down on the Y direction. Not sure if he can jump that high. Control L, S, Y. Control L, duplicate. And I think what I'm going to do now is put like a button up here. And now to get up to this ledge, he has to run up here, push the button, and then some sort of stairs come up out of the ground. So for that, I'm first going to make this edge taller, because right now he can jump that high. So maybe, no, that's a bad idea. Yeah, I'll just do that. So first let's make sure he can't jump that high. Not even close. And so I'm going to make a very obvious button up here. So I'll just hit Control L, Shift D to duplicate. Scale this way down. And maybe delete the top one. And that's too tall. Control L, scale these way down. And drop it into the ground. That should be better. And I want this to look more like a pedestal, so I'm just going to take all three pieces, P to separate selection. Now I have a separate object that I can work on, and I'm going to apply the solidify, and now I can do whatever I want with this geometry, rather than just having to work with a single face. Yeah, that looks more like a button. Why don't we check that out up here? Whoops. Well, that's too short. And the player is 2 units tall, so if I wanted to, I could just add a cube here. And that should be about how tall the player is. The camera's about here, so I want this to be a little bit below eye level. And for some reason it won't let me zoom in on it, so I'm going to File, User Preferences, and zoom to... Yeah, I guess I'll try auto depth. And that's not working. Zoom to mouse position. That's not helping either. Another thing I can try is changing my lens here. Alright, now I got what I want, and I'll just set this back to 60, or I think it was 30 by default. So if I save and go back to Unity, now that should be a more acceptable height. Yeah, that's perfect. Now we can do some basic scripting. So when I run up to this, I want some text to pop up. Probably saying something like E to push button. So I'm going to go into UI, Canvas. And I don't want that to be directly on the player. Screen space overlay is fine. Actually, why don't we do screen space camera? And that's just going to make it perfectly fit the field of view of the player. Plane distance 1. Beautiful. Now I'm going to right click on this and create UI text. And that'll just pop up right here. And I'll just call this tooltip. And I want it to be much larger. I'm also going to pop out my game view. And that way I can see it better as I'm working on it. So my tooltip, it should be aligned to top right. And so when this is middle aligned, as I resize this, it's not anchored very well. Like it's being anchored toward the center of the screen. If I want it anchored at the top right, I have to click here. And now as I move it around, it's anchored, but it's also following these rules. And I'm going to make this right and top. I'm surprised that's not anchoring better. What's going on here? Oh, okay. So the problem was, now you can see it's anchoring perfectly. I guess that's possibly just a glitch in Unity. Um, it's for some reason it's not taking my gameplay window into account when I have them separated. So when it's here, it's anchored right. You can see it's locked in the top corner. When it's broken out like this, not anchored correctly. And it might be worthwhile to file some sort of bug with Unity so they can check that out, because that's probably not the intended behavior. Anyway, now that I know for sure that it's being locked correctly, I'm just going to, I guess I have to dock it now to make sure this works. I'm going to increase the width and height, and increase my font size to about 35. And now as I type, it expands out like that. So I'm just going to say press E to push button. I'll say interact. Yeah, that'll work. Save. And I hate this font, so I have a few different options. I could go to the Unity Asset Store and find some font. And usually I don't see too much here that I like. None of these really pop out as too interesting. This one looks okay actually. But they want it to be animated, and so I don't know what their script actually does, so I'm just going to ignore that. I think there's a website called Dafont. Yeah, I've used this before, so I just want to make sure that I go to search. Actually, I know there's a checkbox somewhere that says like only royalty free, but why don't we just look for something sci-fi-esque? Distorted. Oh, here we go. More options. 100% free. Submit. And I like this one. That matches the feel that I'm trying to go for. So I'm just going to download this, open it up, and copy these into my Unity project. New folder, imported, new folder, fonts, and paste. Alright, now I can click on my tooltip and go to broken glass. Ooh, yeah. So they look the same, there's just two different file formats. I'm not sure what the difference is between OTF and TFF. I'll just pick the top one. And I need the font to be bigger. I'm just going to do 70. And it disappeared because my height is not large enough. So bring up the height and bring up the width. And now I have to reposition it again. And for that, I'm just clicking on the label and then dragging. And I think I want to bring that down further. Whoops. Yeah, that'll be good. Alright. Save. Now I'm just going to create a very basic script here called interact toggle. And yeah, that'll be fine. I'm also going to create a script on the player that's going to control the actually I guess I don't want to put that on the player. I'm going to put it on the canvas just to make things dead simple. So I'm dropping this on the canvas. It's called tooltip controller, and tooltip controller will be activated by interact toggle. And I'm also going to go back into the scene view, go up to here, and I want to create something called a trigger. It's been such a long time since I've done this, it actually feels really good to like go back to the basics. I did this years and years ago when I was first getting into Unity. So now I'm going to hit the arg key and scale this up. So whenever the player is inside this box, it's going to show the tooltip interact with E. So I'll just put it there. Just to make sure it's positioned correctly, I'm going to hide the mesh renderer. And yeah, that looks good. And now instead of box collider, because if the player runs into this, they're going to stop as soon as they hit this wall because it's a collider. If we check is trigger, this is now no longer a collider, it's just an event trigger. So the player can run through it, and whenever he runs into this, it's going to send a message to our event system. So I'm going to add our component interact toggle. And actually, I don't like that name at all, so I'm going to delete that script and create a new one called trigger tooltip. And that's much more explicit because this thing is only designed to act as the trigger. So I'll call it trigger tooltip. And while I'm at it, I'll create another called button zone. And so if the player is within this trigger, they can also hit E, and this controls the button behavior. This activates the tooltip, and then this displays the tooltip. So all of the responsibilities are separated. So now trigger tooltip has button zone, and it has trigger tooltip. I'm going to open this one up. And this script is also going to determine what the tooltip says. So public text, actually string, tooltip contents. And so when he comes into this, it's going to say, press E to interact. Save. Void on, trigger, enter. And for now, we'll just say print E. Alright, so we got our message, so we know the trigger field works. And now my tooltip controller, I'm going to make this a singleton. So any class can access this and send it messages. And they don't need a reference to this because this has a reference to itself, which will be static. So if you don't know what a singleton is, that's fine. You don't really have to understand it for this, but it's worthwhile to look up. I'm just not going to explain it here. So public static tooltip controller, and I'll call this instance. So at the start of the game, instance equals this. So now this guy has a reference to itself, and then anyone in the world can reference this by just saying tooltip controller dot instance, and then like update or whatever. So now nobody needs a reference to this because they can just call this line of code. And so what are they going to do when they contact it? Well, they're going to say they're going to give it a message to display. So public void display message, and they're going to give it a message, so that'll be the incoming parameter, string message. And if I was a newbie, I would put like print message here, and then make sure that I can actually get this far before continuing forward. But I know this is going to work, so I'm not going to bother testing it now. So anyone can reference to this, anyone can give it a message. When they give it a message, we want it to display that to the text field. So we need a reference to that. So public text, and to get the text, we need to use unityengine.ui. Public text, tooltip text. And by default, we should disable the tooltip text. So when the game starts, let's disable that. And so for that, we use the setActive method, or set. Oh, okay. So we want tooltip.gameObject.setActive, false. Now, when we send a message to display, we're going to activate the tooltip for a certain amount of time, and that time will be determined by public float tooltip duration, and we'll have a private float called tooltip cooldown. by default, let's just set the duration to 1 second. And I use the exact same methodology whenever I want something to time out. I just use two variables. One is the amount of time that it's always going to take. So that's like that's whatever I want the interval to be. And then this one, I always name them the same. I always end this one as cooldown. And this is the actual, this is the timer. Because this one never changes. And then this one changes every time based on what we're doing. So I'll just show you. If time.time is greater than tooltip cooldown, so like we activated the message. Right, so we give it a message, we display it to the screen, and then we say, okay, we're going to run out of time in the current time plus whatever the duration is going to be. And then in update, once time has passed this allotted duration, then we're going to deactivate the tooltip. And so I want to make sure I'm activating it here, deactivating it here. Now we still don't have an actual reference to the tooltip, so I'm going to go to Canvas. I have my tooltip controller, and it's expecting a text object here. So now when I hit play, I shouldn't see anything. And nothing pops up, and that's because we're not actually calling the method. So now in trigger tooltip, rather than just printing E, we're going to say tooltip controller dot instance dot display message, and we're going to give it tooltip contents. And so that should appear for 1 second and then time out. Perfect. And we can reactivate it by just walking backward. And I guess 1 second probably wasn't quite long enough, so we can just click on tooltip trigger. Oh, actually, that's in tooltip controller. And I'll just set this to 2.5. All right. And I think that in general, if the user presses the button that is being displayed, we should just get rid of the message. So if, and I can actually just put this in the same if statement, if, so this will be an or. If we do this, or if somebody presses E, input.get key down, key code E, then we hide the message. So we run in, we press E, it's gone. Awesome. So now when we hit E, we also want to either raise a bridge or lower this wall. And I like the bridge idea better. So for that, I'm going to go back to Blender. And I'll create a separate object. Shift A, cube. And once again, it's not letting me zoom in for some strange reason. So I'm just going to play with the view settings and display. No, where is that? Here we go. Alright, so scale in the X direction, scale in the Y direction, Control R, whoops. And I guess I might as well go into vertex mode and then use the mirror modifier. So X, delete vertices, add mirror. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. That looks pretty interesting. I'm going to take this edge and bevel it with Control B. And usually I'm not going for realism, I'm going for interesting look. And I think as a bridge, this looks interesting enough. And yeah, I created it as a separate object. It would have made more sense to make this in a separate file, but I'm just being lazy. But I think I actually will get this into a separate file. So I'm going to rename this as bridge. Save. I'm going to open up Blender again. And append documents, GitHub. That's weird. Is this saved there? Oh, for some reason this is being saved as untitled. So arc prototype and level 1. And I want to take the bridge object. Alt-G to recenter. Now I'm going to take everything and scale it down on the y-axis. And we'll just call this bridge. Whoops. Save. And I've done animated bridges before in Blender. I think it would be fun to try. Why is that? Oh. Now I can just delete this game object from the scene. If I do that though, it's going to break the prefab instance. And now, if I did that every time I save and re-import the level, it's not going to update the map. I would have to drop it into the scene again. So I don't want to bother with that. I can actually just go back and delete this from the Blender scene. Now it'll disappear from Unity. Maybe not. Oh, and that's because I'm saving to a different location actually. So I might as well just delete this whole thing. And that was positioned at 0, 0, 0, so that won't give us a problem. Now go back to models, arc prototype, and drop this in. And reset. I need to make sure this is importing with colliders, and that option wasn't checked anymore because I saved it as a separate file. So apply that. Do the same thing to the bridge. Generate colliders, apply. And you can tell that it's sideways, so I need to do my stupid, useless rotation fix. RX minus 90, Control A, rotation scale, RX 90, and save. Now it imports correctly. Now thanks to Unity. And so I've done animated bridges in Blender before where I actually create an animation. I think it would be fun to try to control the animation a little bit more procedurally this time. So what I'm going to do is drop this in. And I think I'll start with where I want everything to end up. And then I'm going to use some basic scripting to push everything into place. So I'll do 5, 4.5. And I think in my character there's probably some sort of like minimum step height. Step offset 0.3. I think so. If I offset these by 0.3, he's just going to be able to walk straight up them. And I'm just going to modify this to like 0.6. So 4.5, 5, 6, or whoops. Yeah, so he should be able to just step from one to the other. And if I make these a little bit thinner, they'll snap more easily. So S, Y, scale down, save. So delete, delete, Control D. There we go. Now we're moving. And I'm also going to make them shorter. Maybe not that short. Alright, so he could walk up it, but it was pretty bumpy. And he got stuck at the top. One, two. 1, 2. Alright, so let's see if he can run the whole way up this. Yep, and then he's stuck. Oh, he actually jumped back over. Alright, that'll work. So now, to animate these procedurally, I think what I'm going to do is start them off with a height of like 12, but they're also going to remember their initial position. So I've never done this before, but I think it's kind of a cool idea. So I'm going to create a new script called animated scenery. And I might as well put all these on a child object. Let's just say stairs 1. And I have my button zone. As soon as a player runs into this, or no, actually, as soon as a player is inside this and they press E, we're going to send a message to stairs, and that's going to broadcast down through each of these children and tell them to fall into place. But they're actually going to start off at a height of like 14. So let's open up the environment thing, or animated scenery. There we go. So private vector3 start position. Start position equals transform.position. So they started here, they're saving that position into this variable, and then they're just going to jump up to a height of 15. So now transform.position equals transform.position. And actually, why don't I just say transform.translate? No, because I want them all to have the exact same height. So transform.position equals new vector3. Sorry, I'm just trying to think of the most explicit way to do this. So vector3, I mean, I guess I have that stored in start position. Vector3 rest position equals start position. Rest position dot y equals 15. And transform dot position equals rest position. Because I can't do rest position, I mean I can't do transform dot position dot y because I think that's read only. I don't think I can just assign directly to that. Maybe I can. I don't think I used to be able to anyway. Either way, now that once the game starts, everything should jump up to a height of 15. I don't think I've actually applied that script to these objects yet, though. So animated scenery. All right, so now they're floating. All right, now when the player presses E, I want them to fall down into position. And I think off the bat, I'm just going to not bother waiting for E. I'm just going to start moving them into position. So void move to position. And I'll just set a private variable, private bool should move equals false. So by default, they should remain in whatever position they are. And then once we call move position, we say should move equals true. Let's create a public float move speed equals 2f. And let's just do 1f so they move slowly at first. We can increase that later if it's too slow. Now update if should move transform.translate Actually, I think there's a move toward. It's in vector3. So transform dot position equals v3 dot move toward. So we have the current position, and we have the desired position, which is start position. And then we have move speed, which I'm going to multiply by time.delta time. And what that does is just normalizes it. So this is being called every single frame. If the frame rate is really slow or if it's really fast, this is going to be called more and less often depending on the frame rate. But this is just going to normalize it. So whatever the frame rate is, we're always moving at exactly this speed. So when I hit play, It's not going to do anything. And why don't we just say should move equals true so we can see it in action. And that is very slow. It did give us the desired effect though. So why don't we move this up to like 4 and try it again. Not bad. I like how simple it is. Like now we can animate anything. Like we could have any sort of bridge or elevator or anything sort of just like float into place. I think it would look better if it came up out of the ground. And why don't we just give it a variable that we can mess with in the inspector. We don't want to hard code it to 15 every single time. Sometimes we want it to come up out of the floor, sometimes we want it to come from the side. So why don't we say public float I'm trying to decide if I want it to have like x, y, and z coordinates. I'll say rest height. And by default that'll be 14. And let's try seeing what it looks like if it comes up out of the floor. So I'll just do rest height equals -5 f. Oh, that looked really cool. Now I'm going to go back to this file, and I think I'm just going to take this face and move it down. So that way they can see the elevator, and it's not just like rising from the depths of the floor. Control L, Shift Duplicate, RZ 180. And if the player falls down there by accident, now they have an escape route. And I might as well pull this down a little further. Save. Nice. And I don't like the whole jumping aspect here, so I'm going to take these, Control L and delete. And I'm going to Shift Duplicate this, R, Y, whoops, R, X. And I'm going to pull this whole thing forward. Now one bad part about this design is moving things, like when I move things around in Blender, but the corresponding triggers are not being moved around in Unity. So I need to keep in mind that if I modify the level, I also need to find the triggers and push them into place. Alright, I think the prototype is coming together pretty well. I'm going to scale this down a little bit, and I don't think that should affect the behavior at all, aside from making it not clip through the ground. Now I'm going to break this out into a separate view so that I can see where these are when the game starts. And it looks like they were above the floor, so that's good. Now we want to allow this trigger to activate the stairs. So for that, let's go to button zone. And I believe that there is an onTriggerStay method. It's almost called every frame for every collider other than the one that is touching the trigger. Oh, okay. So anything inside the trigger should call this method almost every frame. I don't like the word almost, because if the user presses the E key and this isn't being called, the key press is just going to be lost. And that's annoying. So I don't want to count on that method. Well, I mean, yeah, we can count on it, but we're not going to use on key. Like, we have to just make sure we use the right key method. And my cat needs attention, so I'm going to pause the video and I'll be. Alright, I'm back. I've completely lost my train of thought. I think we were looking at. Oh yeah, so we're trying to activate the bridge by pressing the button, and we're going to use the onTriggerStay method. We just need to make sure that we actually listen for the button press every frame. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So first I'm going to say public bool triggered equals false. So the game starts, we haven't been triggered yet. In update, and actually onTriggerStay, this message is sent to the trigger and the collider that touches the trigger. The events are only sent if there's a rigid body attached to one of them, which is fine. There's one attached to the player. Actually, is there one attached to the player? Probably not. Oh, there is. Okay, great. So we have the rigid body, so there's definitely going to be a message sent almost every frame to both the trigger and the player. So I'm just going to move this off to the side. Button zone. So this won't be happening in update. It will be happening in void onTriggerStay. And by default, this has an optional parameter other. We don't need that though, because we're not going to communicate with the player. Now, if input.getButton. So there's two options for getting the input, and now this is kind of a big deal because onTriggerStay is not being called every frame. So if we use this method, which returns true during only the frame the user pressed the button, if we use this method, it could be missed, because this one, as soon as they press the E key, this returns true. But we don't necessarily know that onTriggerStay is being called on the same frame that getButton is returning true. But if we use this one, getButton, this returns true every single frame that the user is holding the button. So I think that'll be enough, because if the user presses the button for maybe like 5 frames, hopefully on trigger stay happens in one of those frames. If the user presses the button too fast, we might miss that input, but I think this will be good enough, and we can test it. And I take that back. I'm not going to test it. If you want, you can test it, but I'm not going to run any sort of empirical test on this. I'm just going to assume in most cases it'll be fine, and it's a game, so it'll be fine. Input get button, and actually I think I want get key. And the same thing applies. Get key down is only one frame. Get key happens every frame. So we're using E. And now when we do that, we just want to send a message to whatever we're trying to trigger. And so we need a reference to that. So I'm going to say public game object trigger target, save. And so now in our trigger tooltip, and it just occurred to me, I can drop this onto my cube here, and I think now when I move that around, it might bring the tooltip with it. I mean, it might, no, it didn't work. Fair enough. I was thinking if you created that parent-child relationship, then moved this in Blender, that the trigger would follow it, but that's not the case. So if I move this around in Blender, I just need to make sure I move the box with it. So now the trigger is working. I set it up to accept the input, and I just want to make sure that I attach the stairs as the target. And I think if I broadcast a message to this, it will propagate through the children. So trigger target dot broadcast, and we have a few different options. I'm going to look up the broadcast parameters. I think whatever you put in as a parameter, that's just going to be the parameters that get passed into the method. So actually, I guess that's not going to help us. So we need method name, and I'm going to also add send message options, and I'll show you that in a second. So for the method name, we're sending it to animated scenery, and the method will be move to position. So let's make this public, and button zone we're going to call move to position, and we're going to say send message options don't require receiver. So if there was any sort of weird condition where the stairs got destroyed from the scene, this means we don't actually need the message to be received. So don't throw an error, because I don't care if the stairs were broken. If they were, just don't do anything. And by default, animated scenery should move is false. And now that the stairs should wait to be activated. And I want to make sure these aren't clipping into the floor too much. Yeah, that looks fine. So I run up here, jump, E to interact, and the stairs move into position. Awesome. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. And so we can use that for literally any sort of stairs or bridges or anything. Like I could start them here, and then, I mean, we can put them in any position we want. Once the game starts, they're going to move out of position, and then we just have to push a button to put them back into position. So that's an interesting game mechanic. I'm glad it worked. And I think I'll just test it one more time in full screen. I think in the next video I'm going to put a lot more effort into texturing the walls and stuff. Right now the level looks pretty boring, so we'll throw some some interesting colors on the walls and see where it goes. So I'm going to cut this off here and I'll be back in the next video.